This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next from ProCFO Partners. I'm Chris Bentliff, and I have Tony Spina back with us today in the hot seat. Tony, we're continuing conversations we've been having with Jerry and with yourself around manufacturing and around making more of the opportunities in manufacturing where our products are concerned, being sensible, I think, being a little more proactive in making sure we've got opportunities for success. I think that taps into profitability. I think it taps into efficiencies. I think it taps into systems and processes. But let me give you a platform. Let's talk a little bit about, I think, starting with costing, product costs. What do you think are some key things that we should keep in mind as we're costing our products?
All right, well, let me start here. Well, the most obvious effect of inaccurate costing is it leads to poor pricing decisions. Unfairly assigning too much to cost to a product can result in overpricing a product and cause you to lose competitiveness in the marketplace. You know, if somebody else is making a similar product at a lot less, you can lose market share that way. Conversely, if you are under assigning costs or not assigning enough cost to a product, you could, be distorting the margin on the actual product. You may think that your selling price is adequate to cover your costs, and it's not. So you could actually be losing money in those cases on the product.
How do I manage that? How do I think about kind of this fine art of pricing so that my margins are healthy enough for me to make money, but competitive? Do I wait for competition to set the price? Am I fearful to be higher than the competition? Is there a certain range that I should be?
Well, first off, you got to make sure your costing is accurate. So you can do some things there. When we're talking about product costing, you're basically talking about materials, labor, and manufacturing overhead. Materials are often the largest component of cost, but I would say, from my experience, most manufacturing concerns get that right, but it could still be off if you think you should have a 5% scrap rate and you really experience a 10% scrap rate. You could be using more materials than you think you are, which would be reflective. You'd pick that up, through inventory management, and purchasing. As your actual quantities diminish, as compared to what you think actually happened through an ERP system with a full-blown product costing module, so to speak. As far as labor goes, once again, you don't see as much issue with that. But once again, if the labor, things are taking longer than you think they should, or that your costing reflects, you could have a distortion there. But most of the distortion usually comes around the allocation of manufacturing overhead. That's all the costs associated in a plant that support the manufacturing operation itself, and it becomes determination by any manufacturing companies. How am I going to allocate these? And there are a few, traditionally, there are many ways you can allocate it, but the three biggest areas, the three biggest ways manufacturing companies generally allocate them are either direct labor, machine hours, or square footage, or some combination of the three. I should also add, in this day of automation, with many, manufacturing companies going to, automating more, that itself may necessitate a change in the way you're allocating costs, for instance, from direct labor to machine hours. And all of these things, and just to finish, so you start with having, what are my costs? Then you can always compare your costs to the marketplace and do things along those lines to see, wow, I have my costs right. Why is my selling price, so much higher? Why are my costs so much higher than the next guy? And you look for, improvements there to make you more competitive.
Let's unpack some of this, because you said some really interesting things. Automation versus, the labor costs. I imagine that there's a higher front end to get my automation sort of off the ground and running, but then I'm going to save more down the road. Do you have some insight on that? Is there a right time or a right product that I should be keying better into automation, or I should be thinking more about automation versus it's more efficient and effective to stick with a labor force for this kind of manufacturing?
Well, I mean, it's specific to actually what you're making and what's available, to automate. And it becomes a question of, well, what's the cost of, if I decide to automate, what's, the investment, up front, to automate, and what's my payback time? What can I gain in efficiency and reduction in cost? And will it pay for itself over a reasonable amount of time? That's, basically what you're looking at. I mean, certain things, even in the era of automation, there are certain manufacturing processes that can, don't necessarily lend itself to automation or an affordable automation process. Sure, there are plenty of things that can be automated, but not every manufacturing company is going to have the bank account or the borrowing power to, potentially finance something like that, or the product demand to warrant, a shorter payback period.
Materials. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a huge cost, and maybe it's something that can be negotiated or can be leveraged differently than it is. Do you feel like there are more opportunities than manufacturing companies expect to negotiate some of those material costs or volume, or manage shipping or distribution so that it's coming in a different place? Are there more opportunities there than many companies expect or anticipate? Or once you have kind of the relationship you have, it's that's kind of what you're going to be dealing with, and you should take that into the equation?
Well, I think I tend to think there's always opportunities. Some are easier to find than others. It's an investment in time often. I think with regard to suppliers and relationships, I think it's natural for all of us, and no matter what we do, is to get comfortable, with somebody, or or in this case, a business, and you like the relationship, you like seeing Joe Smith when he comes, and a sense of loyalty, but. That said, business is still business. And I think that, on some periodic basis, it's probably good business practice to always, search out the marketplace to see what somebody else can do for you. Can you get a lower cost? Can you negotiate a contract, even with Joe Smith? I mean, often, if the supplier is happy, he's going to be inclined to keep things status quo. So it's often, incumbent, on you as the purchaser to, say, hey, I need to reduce my price 10%. I'm losing market share. What can you do? What if I order more? Can we get a better price? But there are other issues with even ordering more. You got to be able to warehouse.
Right.
You got to be able to, warehouse inventory. So there's no one answer. It really requires an in-depth analysis, to get, to determine, what's right for each manufacturing company.
And that connects to your comment about the overhead and square footage. You might create an opportunity somewhere, and you just now you got to store a whole bunch of stuff. You got to increase square footage in that overhead. I imagine.
One other thing I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to mention this one other issue with the costing that I don't think everybody always realizes, but if you're over costing a product. Okay, you're in effect, you're overstating your inventory. Okay, and if you overstate your inventory, you're overstating your profits, which can result in more tax, and it can also result in if a company's under, let me put it this way, if a company's under operating under a working capital line of credit, or under an asset-based lending formula with their bank. If you understate your inventory, you're understating your inventory value, and that's decreasing the amount of cash you can actually draw on your line. Really? Which I don't think, and cash is king is, I know it's an old adage, but it's true. I don't think people often realize that. Like I said, if you overstate and understatement of inventory also has, profit and loss effects, which, could, either increase or decrease your tax.
So the CFO is a key mind in this whole thing because there are so many levers to pull and balls to juggle and analogies to make. I mean, you just really need to have a really clear focus, even I think as you're getting into innovation, new products or new pricing strategies or whatever. Talk to me a little bit about that, especially around maybe some of the KPIs that I should be keeping in mind, around some of the reporting that are essential for leaders to have to make decisions. What does the CFO need to make sure the guidance is there? What are some of those essential aspects of that?
Well, I think it starts, everybody wants to improve profitability, right? Whether you're a manufacturing company or you're a service provider. In a manufacturing environment, you really kind of need to put together, a profitability improvement strategy. And it often starts, and the easiest place to start, and it surprises me how many, how often this is not done, but is to, look at your customer margins. Okay. Studies show that, all studies show that, the top 20% of your customers, if you will, account for 80% or more of a company's profits. Okay. So that means the opportunity there is to do more business, with those customers, and also an opportunity to look at improving the margins on the other 80%. I mean, there may be cases where you have to lose a customer that isn't profitable in order to gain profitability for the company. If you ask, but in that same vein, if you ask any business owner, manufacturing or otherwise, who their top, 10 or 20 customers are, most are going to rattle off a list based on revenue. Okay. But what you really need to do is determine who your top 20% customers are based on profitability. And that's a whole different exercise, Chris, because that gets into, all right, well, as we were just talking about costing, we were talking about materials, labor, and manufacturing overhead, but a company's profitability is also includes, is a function of what their SG&A expenses are, the selling, general, and administrative expenses are. So to do a true customer profitability analysis, you would have to embark on allocating the SG&A cost to each, to either, a customer or a product. You can take any approach here. You can take, a customer approach to allocate an SG&A. You can take a product approach to take an SG&A. And that'll show you who your top 20%, who your top profitable customers are. That's your real top 20%, not necessarily based on revenue size, but based on profitability. And what becomes the issue here is, how do I allocate SG&A costs? There's traditional methods, but they're flawed. Where people say, oh, I just take, I do it based on revenue. Well, okay, well, that's flawed. You're right off the bat. For instance, if you're going to allocate SG&A costs based on revenue, if you have one product that has a high material content, for instance, it's going to have a higher, selling price, and it's going to, by your formula, it's going to pick up an disproportionate share or unfair share of the SG&A costs, which would distort its profitability, would understate it, and fairly benefit other products. That's one example. Another way people often do it is based on sales orders or sales invoices, which is another arbitrary method, which can distort things as well. There's no really perfect way to do it, Chris, but, I'm a proponent of, if you're really going to embark on this exercise, is to really look at everything and try to allocate certain things specifically and other things, maybe generally. For instance, you may embark, say you had, a large advertising budget, but you weren't advertising for all your products. And if you just made some blanket assumption and, attributed the advertising to all products or all customers, it would distort the profitability, inflate or deflate the profitability for certain customers or products. So it's something that can actually, I found, can be very eye-opening for small to mid-sized manufacturers specifically, to know who their most profitable customers are, down to the profit line that you see on your profit and loss statement.
Is that if you had one piece of advice for those small, medium manufacturers? Do this thing first. See if you can get this right first. Would that be on the top of your list?
That would be, yes, right at the top. Look at your customer margins and, and really take a look at who your most profitable customers are. And some things you find may be eye-opening. But it also kind of directs you as to where you should be focusing your efforts.
Tony Spina, back with us.
Products or customers, huh?
Tony Spina, back with us again. I feel like, again, we just scratched the surface. And
we're done already?
We got to have you come back so we can dig deeper into a lot of this stuff. But this is a masterclass in manufacturing costing. Thank you so much for your very specific and actionable insights. It really helps, I think, our listeners to develop a sense of what they could be doing differently and where to connect with this. And as always, I think that CFO is an essential ingredient to have some of this perspective. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.